Hi, my name's Stewart Lynch. In this third video of my Foundation Models Framework series, we're going to explore guided generation. And that's a feature that lets you shape structured AI responses using your own Swift types. You'll see how to generate workouts and creative titles with better formatting, error handling, and streaming results. This is the third video in the series on Apple's Foundation Models Framework. If you haven't watched the first two videos in this series, I really recommend that you do, because I'm going to assume that you have and will be using some of the same code that we created in the first two videos. In this video, we'll look at two different examples that use guided generation that's going to allow us to format the response better than just a stream of text. In this first view, we can choose a fitness level, an age group, and a length of a workout, and after tapping the exercise button to generate the set, you'll see that the output comes in when complete, and it's nicely formatted as an array of exercises. On the second tab, you can specify a topic and a number of suggestions to generate, and after tapping the Generate button, it will stream the responses as they are generated, and these too are better formatted than just markdown text. We'll also handle errors. And when an error occurs, it'll present the user with an alert should the topic requested not be allowed by the Foundation's model. I do have a starter project for this video, and I encourage you to download it from the link in the description. There are two branches, and if you want to work along with me, make sure you download the starter project branch. You can either clone the repository or download the zipped archive. I really do recommend that you work along with me, but if you would prefer, you can just watch and download the completed source code from the completed branch. It's completely up to you. Again, if you want an explanation of how this project is set up to generate the tab views with this enum, please watch the introduction in the very first video in this series, as it is identical. I've also added to this project the Foundation Managers class that we created in the first video. So this isn't any new code, but we'll be using it here. I've also got the Intelligence Unavailable view, which uses a Content Unavailable view when either the device doesn't support Foundation models or the Foundation's model is not available. There's also the Navigation Managers class here so that I can use an enums raw value for the navigation bar title. And this was all in that first video. There's the Session Response with Error Swift that contains commented out code that I use in a task unit of work to get a response from the Foundation model and handle the error. So you'll see how that works here too. And then finally, I've included a playground that was used in the first two videos, and we'll get to that. Now in the first view, the FitnessPal view, it has three controls here to generate the workout plan. It allows the user to specify a fitness level, an age group, and the length of the workout. The fitness levels are determined by an enum called the fitness level enum, and there are three different levels specified. While the age group is one of four different age groups where the raw value defines the age group, and since both are case iterable and identifiable, I've used these to create our two pickers. And those choices are bound to two different state variables, fitness level and age group. The slider is bound to the total length state variable, and that's going to determine the length of the workout in minutes. The FitnessPal view itself has all the components already in place to use Foundation models. If this isn't familiar to you, please watch the first two videos in this series. The Foundation Manager itself has two functions, one to check for availability, and the other to remove any markdown tags that are not recognized by SwiftUI. Now, since we can check for availability, we've wrapped the button and the resulting scroll view in an if clause that checks for that availability Boolean property and displays the Intelligence Unavailable view if it isn't. Now, if you'd like to see how this works in the simulator, you can choose to temporarily edit the scheme and run on your simulator. So in Xcode, choose Edit Scheme, and in the section Simulated Foundation Models Availability, choose one of the first three unavailable reasons. Now let's run this on this iPhone 17 Pro simulator. Once it loads, you can see that the content unavailable view is displayed, meaning Foundation's models can't be used. So to continue on, make sure you go back and turn it off. Now, just as a refresher, I'm going to start with a non-guided generation of the result as we have in the past. We already have this session created for the view, so we'll need a prompt, and then we'll need to ask the session to respond to that prompt. Now, before we do that though, let's check again that the model is available with the guard check. Otherwise, we'll just simply return. And then as we're going to be tapping this button often, we'll clear the response content and set it to an empty string. For the prompt, I'm going to use a prompt builder that we learned in the last video to create the prompt using values from our controls. We'll start by asking to recommend some exercises for a total length minutes, and I'll use string interpolation to insert the bound values. Next, I'm going to indicate that the clients are the selected age and age, again using string interpolation to access the age group's enum raw value. And you can specify the fitness level in the same way, using the selected fitness level's raw value. And then I'm going to add one more final prompt in this prompt builder, and that's going to ask if the exercise requires holding position to make sure to indicate how long to hold each of those positions. Well, now that we have a session and a prompt, we can use an asynchronous task to ask the session to respond to the prompt and assign the response content to our response content state variable, which will be displayed in the scroll view. If you tap the Get Exercise button now, you'll see the overlay is displayed, indicating that it's getting the exercises, and the button is disabled until finally the result is displayed. Now, in the last video, we streamed our result as it came in as well, and we're going to do something like that in the next view. But for now, we'll use this non-streaming approach. If you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment. And be sure to subscribe to my channel and enable notifications. You can also subscribe to my newsletter that comes out on Wednesdays 2 or 3 times a month. I'll leave a link in the description. The newsletter will tell you about my current and future videos, along with other things that I discover along my coding and personal journey that I think you might find interesting. If you enjoy my content and you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. A link's in the description. And if you become a $5 a month monthly member, you can get access to all of my videos, sometimes up to a month before they're released on YouTube. Now, the content is just a string of freeform text, and each time we tap the exercise button, the content will reset and it'll change, and the content structure might be quite different each time. We want to change that. But I want to add one more thing first, and that's to give the session some overall instructions to be used for every prompt, and that can't be changed by user input. So the session object has a property called instructions. And this can be a string or an instructions builder, just like the prompt builder. So I'm going to use an instructions builder, and I'm going to add 2 instructions. The first, so let the session know that I'm an experienced trainer. And for the second instruction, I'm going to indicate that the specialty is dealing with existing injuries. So what's the difference between instructions and prompts? Well, instructions can be used to define a persona or set rules or specify desired formats for the response. And this should come from the developer. Prompts, on the other hand, can come from someone using the app. And the model is trained to obey instructions over prompts. And this can help protect against prompt injection attacks, where the user may ask the model to ignore guidance provided in the prompt. As a rule, keep the instructions static and avoid inserting user input into them. So this will give the model more context to work with. So let's try one more time. I'm going to choose an advanced workout for a young adult, and I'm going to specify it for 20 minutes. Well, it looks like I forgot to replace the unrecognized markdown tags. So let me surround this response with the minimized markdown function. Let's try this once more as an advanced young adult session for 30 minutes. This is better. With foundation models, if you want your response to be more structured, you can use guided generation so that the response will fit into your own predefined models. And this means that you don't have to worry about trying to parse the response. For example, let's say we want our results to be an array of uniform exercises that we can display to the user in a list formatted the way we want, rather than the freeform text view. So below the enums, I'm going to create a struct. And I want to display a list, so I'm going to make it identifiable. And that struct I'm going to call is exercise. So I'll need an ID property that I'll just assign it to a UUID. I'm going to want a name as a string, instructions as a string, benefits as a string, fitness, which is going to be a fitness level enum case, age group, which will be an age group enum case, and repetitions, which is an int representing the number of reps for each of the exercises. Now, if we want our results to be displayed as an array of these exercise types, we'll need to decorate our struct with the generable macro. And then for each of the properties that we want to generate, we can also add a guide using the guide macro, and it has a description argument for that, which is a string. And here's where we can define exactly what that property represents. So in the first case, for the name, this will be the name of the exercise. The second property, instructions, we'll need a guide with a description. And this will be a short description of how to perform the exercise. For the third, another guide with a description, the benefits, we want to know the benefits of performing the exercise. And then for the next two, which are enums, in the cases of the fitness level, we're going to ask that the exercise should be specific to this fitness level. And for the age group, the guide's description should be, this exercise should be appropriate for this age group. For repetitions, this is an int, and I want to limit the number of repetitions to be in a range of 1 through 10. So after providing the instruction here about what this represents, I can also add a generation guide, such as a range, which is going to run from 1 through 10. I see if I build, I'm getting an error. And that's because my exercise struct is declared as being generable, and that means that all properties must also be generable. Now, native types like strings and ints are, but we have two of our own defined enums that must also be declared as generable. And since both of those have string raw values, there is no issues by making those both generable enums. So you can check out the other generation guides by checking out the documentation. I'll leave a link in the description. But also, I have to reference Mark Moykin's book on AI mastery, which has an excellent chapter on guided generation that goes into much more detail than I can in this video. And I've mentioned this before. I highly recommend this book. My affiliate link is in the description, and if you use that link, you'll be supporting my channel as well. Before I update this view, I want to test this out in the playground. So I'm going to copy this prompt, and I'm going to use that in my playground. So how can we use this? Let's go back to our playground and let's add a new one. And I'm going to call this one guided generation. So first we'll need a session that's an instance of the language model section class. I'm just going to omit the instruction for now. For the prompt, I'm just going to paste in that prompt that we copied right in here, and I'm going to replace the interpolated values with hard-coded strings. So for example, the length is going to be 10 minutes. The age group is going to be over 65 years old. Fitness level will simply be intermediate. And once I've done that, I can try and await the call to the session's respond method with the prompt. But I need to add a generating argument to tell it that I want it to generate an array of exercise type objects. So an array of exercise, and we specify .self for the type. And I don't need the remaining arguments, so I'll just remove them. So as this playground gets executed, I can make sure I go to the playground canvas for this guided generation. And I can see that the content displays 5 elements of a collection of exercise type objects. And I can expand any one of those elements to see that it has been formed using our guided generation prompts. So let's go back to our view and implement it here. We're no longer expecting to get back a string as a response content. Instead, we'll want an array of exercise. So I'm going to create a new property called exercises and initialize it as an empty array of exercise. So I can remove the response content property now. And therefore, at the same time, I'll need to remove the scroll view from the body. And I'm going to replace it with a list view where I'm going to be presenting my array of exercise. And I'm going to make sure that I set the list style to plain. In the button action then, instead of setting the response content to an empty string, we'll just remove all of the objects from the exercises array. Now the error in our task makes no sense here as we no longer get response content, so remove that line of code. This line gets replaced with assigning to the exercises array the result of trying and awaiting the same session respond method with that same prompt, but also indicate that we are generating an array of exercise type objects. And then we'll specify that we want the content property of that result. Well, now that we have an array of exercises, and since it's identifiable, within our list, we can use a for each loop to display those exercises in a nicely formatted way. So for each of the exercises, I'll get an exercise iterator that I can use in the creation of a V-stack with an alignment that's leading. For the first item in the V-stack, I'll create a text view displaying the exercise name. And then I'll specify a font that is a bold title 3. Below that, I'll get a text view where the exercise instructions are displayed. Below that, we'll display in a text view the exercise benefits, but I'm going to set the foreground style to secondary here. Below that again, I'll use string interpolation to display the exercise repetitions in a text view, followed by the string repetitions. And then finally, another text view that's simply going to use string interpolation to display the exercise's age group label property, followed by the exercise fitness raw value. So let's try this out. I'm going to create an exercise for a beginning teenager for 20 minutes. After generating the exercises, we get a nicely formatted list of exercises to follow. In the previous view, we had to wait until the content was fully loaded before it was presented to the user. In this example, we want to stream the content as it's coming in. Well, in the last video, we streamed the content as it was coming in, but this was not guided content. It was the long string of text. With guided content, we need to make some adjustments. In this topic titles view, I have a text field and a stepper that's going to allow me to enter a topic description and a number and have foundation models generate that number of topic titles and subtitles or taglines for each of the different topics. Well, this could be used for a number of different things, as you will see. So there's currently a topic struct that has those two properties, title and catchphrase, both strings. And I already have an empty array of these as a state variable called topics. And I could do just as I did in the previous video and use a guided generation to populate that array. The difference is that I want to stream the content as it comes in. And because we allow the user to enter free form text, it could be that some guardrails are hit. So we'll need to show some kind of an error to the user if that happens. So first, let's update our topic struct so that it conforms to the generable protocol. And we do that by applying the generable macro. Once we do that, we can also provide guides for each of our properties. So for the first one, the title, we'll use the guide with the description, the topic title. And for the catchphrase, another guide, the description is going to be a subtitle or catchphrase for the topic. Again, I've already set the pieces in place to stream the content, except for one thing. The content coming in is not a string, and it's not even a full array of topics. Instead, what it is partially generated content. So this means that we have to change our topics array to be an array of topic that is partially generated. Well, like the previous view, I want to provide a global instruction to the session. So when I create the session, let's also add instructions. And this time I'm just going to specify a string. So the string is, I'm setting up the idea of this language model by saying that you are a creative marketing expert and your job is to generate creative titles and catchphrases for the topic specified. Now the rest is going to be a bit repetitive, but the more you do something, the better you get to understand what you're doing. So in the action button, I'm going to first do a guard check to make sure that the model is available. Else, I'm going to return. Next, I want to clear that topics array if there was already one there. My prompt this time is pretty simple. We'll create the prompt and we'll just say create, then using string interpolation, a number, topics based on, again with string interpolation, whatever I entered into that topic text field. And since we're going to stream the content, we'll need to create a stream. And this is done by using the session's stream response method to the prompt, as we did in the last video, but this time we're telling it to generate an array of topic types, so .self. Next then, we can create a task unit of work that will loop through the async stream using a for loop to try and await the partial response in the stream. And since it's a partial response, we can then update our topics array with the partial response content that we can embed within an animation block. And you can see that we are checking for the session is responding property. So we should be disabling the button when the session is responding and at the same time presenting an overlay over the current empty list view. And it's in this list view where we can present our topics. Now notice that topic doesn't have an ID, and I want to use a for each loop. I don't, however, in this case, need to create an ID property because the async stream will generate a unique ID for each topic in the background. So I can, within the list view, use a for each over the topics and get a topic iterator for which we can create our list. Now, since the topics is an array of partially generated objects, each of the properties are optional. So we need to use an if-let to unwrap both of them. So if-let title is equal to topic title, let catchphrase is equal to topic catchphrase, unwrapping them. Then once we have those, we can create a VStack with a leading alignment. Then as the first item in the VStack, I'm going to create a text view to display the title, and then apply a font of title 3 being bold. And then I'll follow that with another text view that's going to display the catchphrase with a subheadline font. And I want that to be aligned to the right, so I'm going to use a frame with the max width being infinity and the alignment being trailing. So let's see how this works so far. I've just returned from vacation, and I want to display a list of 10 titles for a blog on my vacation in Provence, France. When I tap on the button, though, it's not getting disabled, and I don't see any progress overlay, so I'm wondering if it's working. But very shortly, I see the content is being generated and it's streaming in. Well, in order to fix this, I'll need to go back to my session that's created and make this a state property that's observable. So I'm going to change this session to be a state property as a private var. So let me try one more topic. I like to get a list of topics or a list of titles for videos on SwiftUI tips and tricks. And I just want 5 of them in case I'm creating a new video. Now when I tap on the button, it does get disabled and the progress overlay as the content is streamed in. Let me ask for some titles on books on gun making. Well, this time it spins, but no results come in. So I'm going to run this in the simulator and try to see what might be going on. If I try that same prompt, I see that as it runs, in the console, I get an error that says safety guardrails were triggered, and it stops generating the content. Well, that's not a great user experience, so I want to fix that. Now, remember in the previous sessions, we used the do catch block to handle errors. So I'm just going to go back to that session response with the errors file, and I'm going to copy that block of text. So I'm going to return to my task in the topic titles view, and within the task, I'm going to paste in that block of code, and in the do block, I'm going to use that for try await loop that we had there. The catch block, however, is expecting to update response content, which we don't have. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an optional state string property called error string. And that's what I'm going to update if I get an error. So back here then in my catch block, I can replace each instance of the response content with an error string. Now, if you don't know what I'm doing here to select all instances of response content, I just selected one of them, and then I used Option Command and pressed the letter E each time to select the next one until I have all of them selected. And then as I type, all of them are going to get replaced all at once. Now, the failure reason and recovery suggestion properties are showing errors because we can't use a plus equal on an optional string. But one of the previous cases will have already been applied to error strings, so it has a value so we can safely unwrap them here. So now all that's left is to present some kind of user message when it's been set. And I'm going to use an alert for that. So below the onChange modifiers, I'm going to present an alert that uses isPresented, has some actions, and a message. For the title key, I'm going to use prompt error. IsPresented needs to be bound to a binding of some state property. Well, I have a state property, but it's not a Boolean. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a constant and then evaluate that constant as a Boolean depending on whether or not error string is not equal to nil. Then I can tab into the actions and hit enter to get our two closures. For actions, I'll create a button with the label OK. And then for the action, I'll simply reset the error string back to nil and reset the topic to an empty string. And then for the message then, I'll simply use an iflet to unwrap the error string and display that in the text view. So let me run this now then on the simulator and try that same prompt. This time I get an error displaying that error message. Perfect. If I press OK, I can go back and change the prompt and try again. It works. So that completes this video. And I hope you've enjoyed it and have learned something new that you can use in your own projects going forward if you want to implement foundation models. I still have at least 2 more videos in this series, so make sure that you check the link in the description for the entire playlist. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps. And remember, you can get access to my videos by downloading my free channel listing app for the Mac, or you can use the web version on an iPhone or an iPad to get better searching and viewing of my content. Links are in the description.